It was 1791, in the backcountry woodlands of Pennsylvania, just over the rugged, pine-spiked ridges of the Appalachian Mountains. The Great Revolutionary War had just ended not more than 8 years ago, separating America from English rule. Now the land was governed by a constitutional republic, with freedom and justice for all. Taxation without representation was over. Or was it? That's what several of the men on the farmsteads in Pennsylvania were wondering just now, as they stood around talking in small groups. They were upset about a new tax that had just been issued. A tax on whiskey. It was supposed to help pay for all the expenses of the past war. But what was so upsetting about a little tax? It sounds very simple. After all, the government must be able to make some kind of money to pay all the soldiers and for the weapons and supplies they had needed, shouldn't they? Well, this tax wasn't quite so simple as it seems. It's a long story, but one worth telling, I think. This is the story of the Whiskey Rebellion. The war for independence from England had left the new-sprung nation in great debt. The debt of the American government was $54 million to be exact. And that wasn't counting the debts of the individual state governments. All 13 states added together made $25 million. In today's money, those numbers would translate to about $1.8 trillion and $839 million. This massive sum was owed to several people. As I said, the soldiers who had fought in the war had not all been paid, and then France was expecting something in return for all the supplies and men they had sent to help in the fighting. But there were also several very wealthy Americans who were awaiting payment as well. These men had never laid a finger to a musket or swung a saber in any of the long years of fighting. Yet it was their money that had made the war possible. All along the way, these rich men had paid for practically everything that the revolutionaries needed to keep up their fight for liberty. I suppose you might think them very patriotic. Except it wasn't really out of a love for freedom that they lent the money. They wanted to get their money back in the end. And with interest, too. And they insisted that they must be paid before anyone else. Robert Morris was one of these rich men. Actually, he was one of the richest men in America at the time. But the American government didn't have a very efficient income to pay all this money back to Morris and everyone else. Really, the only way the government could make money was from the tax that they charged on imports from other countries. And that didn't pay very much. It was going to take a very long time to pay back the debt. Years. Decades even. Morris and the other lenders were not very pleased about this. They didn't want to wait that long for their money. Together with the famous founding fathers of America, they pushed for the creation of a new document for ruling America. The Constitution. You see, before this, America was governed by a different document called the Articles of Confederation. But these articles didn't allow the national government to tax the states. The Constitution would change this and make state taxation legal. Of course, there were other reasons for the writing of the Constitution as well, and it changed many other things beside taxes. But Morris and his rich friends were nonetheless powerful factors in its creation. Come 1789, the Constitution was ratified, or approved, by all the 13 states. Well, except for Rhode Island, actually. They didn't ratify it until 1790, But that's a story for another day. George Washington was elected as the first president of this new republic, and he chose Alexander Hamilton as his Secretary of the Treasury. The Secretary of the Treasury has a pretty big job. He has to watch over and control all the spendings and earnings of the government. And he has to think about paying the government's debts. The structure of taxation was now in place. It was up to Hamilton to make good use of it. Man, Hamilton. That's such a big name. Hey, can I call you Hammy for short? Well, too bad. I'm gonna anyway. Hammy here set to devising the best tax to get the most money as quick as possible, without making too many people, powerful, wealthy people in particular, angry. At last he struck upon an idea. He would tax liquor. Surely, he thought, that would be a good thing to tax. After all, people didn't really need liquor. It was just something people liked to drink. Hamilton's plan seemed simple. For every gallon of liquor that was sold, the seller would have to pay 9 cents of their profits to the government. But there was a hitch. If you happened to be a big company that made a lot of liquor, you could pay a really big flat rate for the year instead. It was more money up front, but it allowed you to pay about 6 cents per gallon on your liquor instead of 9. Businessmen and politicians often have sneaky ways of doing things like that. But what did all this liquor taxing have to do with those backcountry farmers of Pennsylvania? Well, join us next time for episode 18 to find out.